Well, the impacts can be profound financially, and not to mention the stress and anxiety such a unexpected shock can cause veterans and their families. And of course, this happens to members in retirement when their life plans have been made, their standard of living is set, and they lack the wherewithal to earn additional money to repay these overpayments, which of course have been paid to them, as I said previously, monthly over tens of years.
Let's move on to a story which I think may have your blood boiling very shortly. At 25 minutes past 7, more than 1,000 military veterans have been told they must repay tens of thousands of pounds and have their pensions reduced because of calculation errors. The Ministry of Defence said pensions had been overpaid for years, in some cases by more than £100,000. Despite the veterans not being at fault, the burden of correcting the mistake falls on their shoulders rather than on the firms running the pension scheme. Major General Neil Marshall is the Chief Executive of the Forces Pension Society, and he joins us now. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
First of all, tell us how this glitch or this mistake happened, if you don't mind.
Well, quite simply through benefit calculation errors by the Armed Forces Pension Administrator, Defence Business Services UK. Defence Business Services Veterans UK, we're aware of several areas, including national insurance adjustments, pension sharing orders, early departure payments, guaranteed minimum pensions. They sound very technical things, but the fault lies with Defence Business Services Veterans UK and their contractors.
Well, it's just simply they'd got the sums wrong on the spreadsheet and they were overpaying these pensions to your
Yes, so at the macro level, that is the case. There was a compounded errors over time, and these pensions have been overpaid. But because that overpayment has happened over years, then the actual amounts owed are quite significant. But those amounts aren't held by the veterans themselves because the pensions are paid on a monthly basis, as you'd expect.
Of course. So why is the mistake made by someone else the veteran's responsibility to put right?
Well, that is because the Treasury rules. The Ministry of Defence follows Treasury policy and public finance guidance, and we recognise the principle of recovering public monies that have been overpaid. But we also think it's wrong that the scheme administrator, who's made the error in the first place, should attempt to recover the money from members who themselves have acted in good faith. So it's an error by the administrator, but the liability falls upon the individual and their families, and we just think that's fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it a natural thing to do? If you get your pension, you're not going to be asking every month exactly how it's being calculated, and if it's a little bit more generous than you expected, you're just going to think, oh, well, I got my sums wrong. Were people getting paid vastly more than they should have? I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds here.
But we're talking about that over tens of years as well, and also the instructions that they were given when they received their payment instructions said these are the amounts they are calculated. And because some of this happened during their coming of state pension age, when state pension age was 65, then those people were in a bit of financial froth anyway, and then that plays forward with an overpayment that compounds over years. So yes, it's technical, and if there were areas where the individual should have known, then it's entirely right that they repay. But when the individual has acted in good faith and trusted, as one would, the administrator to get it right, then I think it's only right that the administrator and the contractors that they employ should be responsible for repaying what is quite a large capital sum debt. We accept that the future payments will be smaller because the error is known, but asking them to pay a lump sum return and have a reduced pension going forward just isn't fair.
What sort of situation has this put some of your members in?
The impacts can be profound financially, and not to mention the stress and anxiety such a unexpected shock can cause veterans and their families. And of course, this happens to members in retirement when their life plans have been made, their standard of living is set, and they lack the wherewithal to earn additional money to repay these overpayments, which of course have been paid to them, as I said previously, monthly over tens of years. So when sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems fundamentally unfair that somebody else's mistake should be the responsibility of the recipient. I completely understand that if you are being overpaid in principle, then you should be looking to be able to recover that money from people who you have overpaid. But if you're looking at it over a period of years, as you say, more than a decade in some cases, that money's been spent. These people don't have that capital to repay.
Absolutely, and of course, if you look at my understanding is that this wouldn't happen in the private sector, so it really shouldn't happen in the public sector either. And we represent the armed forces community in this regard. So those future reduced payments are a given. The historic overpayment cannot continue. We accept that, but it's more than enough for the veterans to cope with, let alone repay a so-called debt. That debt should lie with the administrator, where the individual has acted in good faith.
And just very quickly, because we're running out of time, exactly how much money are we talking about here, spread between those 1,000 military veterans?
Well, so we have some who are at the sort of 10, 15, 20, 30,000 mark.
But sorry, I mean the total sum that is looking to be recovered.
For the national insurance abatement issue in technical areas, that comes at £5.1 million. That level of debt which is being recovered by the government, but that is not sort of such a material amount that it should be met by the administrator. So
what are you looking at? Legal action, or do you think you can persuade the government through advocacy?
Well, I think it's just doing the right thing. The first thing that needs to happen is that this burden should be removed from the shoulders of the veterans affected, and instead see the public monies owed recovered from the pension administrator and the contractors responsible. And then more broadly, there needs to be a tighter contract management, better process and consistency in decision making, and more transparency over delegated discretionary powers. So we need to see a shift towards accountability rather than the dead hand of the Treasury being interpreted as a license to treat veterans badly. This wouldn't happen in the private sector, nor should it happen in the case of the Armed Forces Pension Scheme.
It is an appalling error, and it is really indefensible that so many people should be forced to bear the burden of somebody else's mistake. Major General Neil Marshall, Chief Executive of the Forces Pension Society, thank you for your time. It's 7:32.